It goes on and on and on.
Remind me of everything tonight.
Yes, I'm in the zone.
I get a good feeling.
Dreaming about the things that we could be.
Good day, everyone.
I am Katrina Morilia.
I'm Lorraine Ingrid Valenciano.
I am Bbtledict. Dear Ordonez.
I am Jake Ryan Baro.
I'm Diana Den Gabriel.
And we are
the reporters for today.
Our subject is Foundation of Special and Inclusive Education, and we are going to discuss the Lesson 1, which is the vision, policy, goals, and objectives of special and inclusive education.
So before we start, I would like to greet you a good day again, everyone. So I hope that we are doing well today, and despite of the activities, the pandemic, and the challenges that we are facing today, we still have the spirit and the courage to strive harder each and every day. So I hope that in this short discussion, you will learn many things and be motivated as a future teachers.
So again, my name is Katrina Morilia, and I'm going to discuss the overview of Lesson 1. Our objectives: by the end of the lesson, the student, teachers should be able to develop a positive attitudes toward the implementation of special and inclusive education. Identify the vision, policy, goals, and objectives of special and inclusive education and be able to cite important events relevant to the implementation of special and inclusive education in the Philippines. Last one, show fair interest and attention through their encouraging actions and pronouncement for young learners to develop the mindset that there is no need to discriminate against learners who are differently able than themselves. Special education. So when we say special education, the terms special education and inclusive education are not synonymous. So special education, it is providing an education, individualized instruction, and support to the students with disabilities or learning difficulties. So it is designed to be a need-based and individualized. So when we say need-based or individualized, it means that every student in the special education will have a different plan depending on their needs, abilities, and goals. So the purpose of special education is to support the students with disabilities as well as the teachers. So the purpose is not necessarily to teach the content, but it is more on to build the academic and developmental skills. So those academic and developmental skills are needed for them to be successful, to be independent learner, and also to function effectively in our society. The Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, CRPD, was signed by the Philippines in 2006 and authorized by the Congress in 2008. So according to it, the state shall ensure the access of the persons with disabilities to an inclusive system of education. So first, let us define inclusive education. So when we say inclusive education, it is a learning environment where children with or without disabilities are taught together as equals. So it is meant for all learners, special students, along with normal students in a general or regular classroom. So therefore, with CRPD, the practice of special education is no longer limited to the special education centers. It is also extended now to general or regular classrooms. So students with disabilities can now engage and learn side by side together with their better abled peers or classmates. So likewise, about the CRPD that we discussed earlier, so CRPD also states that the government shall take appropriate measures to employ teachers, including teachers with disabilities who are qualified in sign language or Braille. When we say Braille, it is a form of written language for blind people in which characters are represented by patterns or raised dots that are felt with their fingertips. And also, to train professionals and staff to work at all levels of education. Such training to have disability awareness and the use of appropriate augmentative and alternative modes, means and formats of communication, educational techniques, and materials to support persons with disabilities.
As a teacher, it is necessary for us to study and to be aware and to be knowledgeable about our students, especially in this kind of situation. The more we become knowledgeable, the more we become equipped, and soon if we experience this kind of issue, surely we can make appropriate and best solution and response.
Hi, I'm Lorraine Valenciana and I'm going to talk about gifted and talented learners. Note that inclusive and special needs education does not only include learners with disabilities. Gifted and talented learners are also included as one of its target populations.
The term students with additional needs is proposed to refer to students with disabilities and those who are gifted and talented. Students with or without disabilities have common needs, but some of them will have additional needs. Gifted learners have outstanding abilities in one or more academic subjects, while on the other hand, talented learners have exceptional abilities in one or more practical subjects. So both gifted and talented students also need gifted education programs, because these students differ from typical students in terms of learning style, depth, and complexity of understanding and potential. Why should we also need to acknowledge and give special needs to gifted and talented learners? Since they have exceptional skills and knowledge, they have mastered the materials, they might think that spending time in school is a waste of time. More likely, they get bored, which makes them lose interest in learning and developing themselves more. That's why we have these programs such as acceleration. For students who are advanced and have a higher thinking level, they may be promoted to a higher level of education. As for the next topic, let's discuss about the implementation of special and inclusive education in the Philippines. It is said that special education is the exercise of educating students with special educational needs in a method that discourses their distinct differences and needs. Ideally, this process involves the individually planned and systematically monitored arrangement of teaching procedures, adapted equipment and materials, and accessible settings. These interventions are designed to help learners with special needs achieve a higher level of personal self-sufficiency and success in school and their community. The birth of special education in the Philippines was in 1907. Special education formally started in the country when the Insular School for the Deaf and Blind was established in Pasay City. It is the pioneer school for the handicapped in the country and in Asia. It is a semi-residential school and the only government-owned institution for the deaf in the country. The Philippine Association for the Deaf spearheaded the Hearing Conservation Week in 1976, noted through Presidential Proclamation 1587, duly signed and approved by then President Ferdinand Marcos. It was also during this point in time that the celebration of the Hearing Conservation Week was commemorated on the third week of November, and thereafter every third week of October. Whereas the association has been providing the deaf free education, vocational training, and job opportunities for the development of their potential, and whereas there is a need to awaken the sympathy and understanding of the general public on the welfare of the deaf to enable them to find their rightful place in the society. In 1991, this time introduced by the Philippine School for the Deaf, which was formerly known as the School for the Deaf and Blind. The Philippine Institute for the Deaf, then President Corazon Aquino, signed Presidential Proclamation 829, declaring November 10 to 16 as Deaf Awareness Week. Stated in the proclamation is the acknowledgement of the deaf as a vital segment of society which can be altered into a significant tribe in attempts for national development and the necessity to concentrate on public awareness on deafness, its prevention, and rehabilitation.
Ordonez, and I'm about to discuss to you the legal basis of the special education in the Philippines. So generally speaking, students with disabilities and special needs may need individually planned and systematically delivered teaching techniques. That's why special education were established and aims to help individuals to develop not only their academic skills but also their personal skills that will help them to become self-sufficient members of the community. The Commonwealth Act No. 3203 was legislated in the year 1935. This provision is the Act for the Care and Protection of the Disabled Children. One of the legal bases of special education in the Philippines is the Articles 356 and 259 under the said Act that states the right of every child to live in an atmosphere conducive to his physical, oral, and intellectual development, and the concomitant duty of the government to promote the full growth of the faculties of every child. Next is the Section 8, Article 15 of the 1973 Constitution of the Philippines that states, the state shall establish and maintain a complete, adequate, and integrated system of education relevant to the goals of national development. The Articles 3 and 74 of the Presidential Decree No. 603 of 1975 is also included, in which it is stated that the emotionally disturbed or socially maladjusted child shall be treated with sympathy and understanding and shall be given the education and care required by his particular condition. Thus, where needs warrant, there shall be at least special classes in every province, and if possible, special schools for the physically handicapped, the mentally retarded, the emotionally disturbed, and the mentally gifted. The private sector shall be given all the necessary inducement and encouragement. So for you to fully understand the previous article I've mentioned, let me state the short differences between emotionally disturbed, socially maladjusted, physically handicapped, mentally retarded, and the mentally gifted child. So basically, emotionally disturbed children have an inability to learn that cannot be explained by intellectual, sensory, or health factors. Some of them may be unable to develop and keep appropriate and satisfactory social relationships with family, peers, and adults in the school system. Some of the emotionally disturbed children may display inappropriate behavior or feelings in response to normal situations, or they may also have a pervasive mood of unhappiness or depression. While the socially maladjusted child is a child who has a persistent pattern of violating societal norms with truancy, substance abuse, a perpetual struggle with authority, is easily frustrated, impulsive, and manipulative. So do you now understand what's the difference of the two? Moving on, what is physically handicapped person? This term is used to describe persons whose impairment or disability affects their capacity to function in a way expected in the society in which they live. For instance, a person who cannot speak cannot readily communicate with others. Lastly is the mentally retardation, which is the mild to severe impairment in intellectual ability equivalent to an IQ of 70 to 75 or below, that is accompanied by significant limitations in social, practical, and conceptual skill necessary for independent daily functioning and that has onset before the age of 18. The legal basis of the special education were made for the common good of the learners, the teachers, as well as other people involved in the education system. As laws were made for the people, especially we, as a future educators, it is our responsibilities to be knowledgeable enough of these laws for us to know our students' rights and responsibilities. Laws are like subject matters or lessons that can be considered effective only when it is taught and understood by the pupils. For the teachers to become effective, it is a must that they understand the legal basis of the education, for it is the foundation of all the policies and rules concerning education. It is like a guiding star that will help the teachers to find the right path they must follow for them to be able to achieve the objectives of the education.
So hello again guys, and now we're going to talk about the Department of Education's vision and policy of special and inclusive education. So according to the DepEd, most of the learners in the Philippines today have average intellectual ability, while a smaller figure either belongs to the sub or above average group. Not just that, because there are also some learners with number 1, sensory impairments. Sensory impairment is when one of your senses, such as sight, hearing, smell, touch, taste, and spatial awareness is no longer normal. For example, if you wear glasses, then you have a sight impairment, and if you find it hard to hear or have a hearing aid, then you have a hearing impairment. Number 2, physical disabilities. Physical disabilities may affect either temporarily or permanently a person's physical capacity and mobility. So there are different causes of physical disabilities, but they can include inherited or genetic disorders, serious illnesses, and injury. And take note, this can also include the brain or spinal cord injuries. For example, multiple sclerosis or cerebral palsy, respiratory disorders, as well as epilepsy. And the third one is the behavioral dilemmas or behavioral disabilities. So there are 2 categories of behavioral disabilities: oppositional defiant disorder and the conduct disorder. The first one, the oppositional defiant disorder, is characterized by extreme non-compliance, negativity, and unwillingness to cooperate or follow directions. So children with this condition are not violent or aggressive. They just simply refuse to cooperate with adults or peers. Meanwhile, the conduct disorder is much more severe. This disorder is characterized by aggression, violence, and harm inflicted on self and others. So students with conduct disorder typically needs to be taught in special education classrooms until their behavior has improved enough to allow contact with the general education population. So to prepare incoming educators like us for the inclusion of exceptional children with special needs in mainstream classes or those disabilities that I have mentioned, the inclusion or incorporation of foundations of special education in the teacher education curriculum was badly needed. That is why we have this course in our program today. DepEd Order 72 of 2009, which has a title of Inclusive Education as Strategy for Increasing Participation Rate of Children. So according to this DepEd order, 2% of the 2.2 million children with disabilities in the Philippines are deprived of one of the basic human rights, which is the education. So DepEd has immediately addressed this problem and pledged the right of these learners to obtain appropriate and proper education within the regular or inclusive classroom setting. So inclusive classroom setting will be discussed in the following slide. Now let's talk about of what DepEd is looking forward in the future, or the vision. The state, community, and family hold a common vision for the Filipino child with special needs. So by the 21st century, DepEd envisioned that learners with disabilities could be adequately provided with basic education, and that education should fully realize their own potentials for development and productivity, as well as being capable of practicing their rights in our society. So with regards to this vision, I just wanna share my experience when I was in high school. So I have a classmate in close friend at the same time that has a mild cerebral palsy. So as part of community, I help him in his studies. Sinasabayan ko siya sa pag-uwi kasi medyo hirap siya maglakad. And sinamahan ko din siyang kumuha ng PWID niya para ma-practice niya yung rights niyang makakuha ng PW's discounts sa mga establishments. The policy of inclusive education for all was adopted in the Philippines to accelerate access to education of children and youth with special needs. According to the DepEd Handbook of Inclusive Education of 2000, it is intended that learners with special needs will get full parental and community support for their education without discrimination of any kind, because as we all know, PWD are the common victims of bullying. The special child should also be provided with a healthy environment along with leisure and recreation and social security measures so that they will also gain physical and mental development. To sum it up, inclusive education forms an essential factor of the general education system that is devoted to an appropriate education for all learners with special needs.
Hi again, I'm Gabriel, and I'll be discussing the goal of special education program. The goal of special education programs. The Department of Education throughout the country is to create a provision for children with special needs appropriate educational services within the mainstream of the basic education. Educational program and services is to meet the needs of the children with special needs who cannot profit from general or regular education because of disabilities and exceptional disabilities. The two split aim comprises the growth of key strategies on legislation, the human resource development, and the family involvement and active partaking of government and non-government education. Human resource development. Program specialists provide the technical support to teachers and school in making decisions on student-related issues, introducing and helping for implementing a variety of instructional material. They provide extensive offering of classes for continuing certification. For example, is professional development. Working with students with behavioral problems, conducting functional behavioral assessment, and writing behavioral intervention plans. Working with students with ADD and ADHD, for example. ADD is a term commonly used to describe symptoms of inattention, distractibility, and poor working memory. ADHD has additional symptoms of hyperactivity and impulsivity. Government and non-government organizations support the person with disability. Government organizations support supplemental security income for the person with disability whose family with low income and asset requirements will receive monthly cash payment intended to help the family. For non-government organization program, so the children's service, medical service, and therapies, access to technological advanced assistant technology, and support service both of the parents and children's family. The first goal is for the person with disability can live independently by learning daily task life. Independent living means the person with disability have a right to live independently as they choose. If they want or they need a help, they can ask for it. The example of daily task life that they need to learn is meal preparation, personal health and hygiene, public transportation, communicate effectively, pursue higher education, be safe at home and community, advocate yourself and your right. The second goal is to provide a flexible and individualized support system for children and youth with special needs in a regular class environment, in school nearest the student's home. Children with disabilities have the opportunity to experience what it's like to be considered normal enough to learn in regular classroom. Accommodating and modifying your classroom environment can help the children be successful learners and be active participants in classroom activities. Third goal is implementing a transition program, vocational training, or preparation for college. For example is service learning. The example of the project ideas for service learning are start with information campaign for the health and prevention topic, cleaning up vacant lot and landscape, start a letter writing club to the student in other state or countries. The second example is independent living skill. For example, students with autism often need additional instruction in day-to-day independent living skills. Skills like getting dressed, making sandwich, following instruction, and buying something from the store are all skills that most people can learn as they grow up by only observing or watching others. But learning through observation does not work for many individuals with autism. They often need specific instruction and repeated practice to learn these skills. The third example is social and communication skill. Communication is very easy to other people. This is equally expressing themselves and making sense of what the world around them. This is equally not more important when the person with learning disability and may not able to interpret the environment as easily as others. The last goal is to make an array of educational programs and service such as special education center built on a school within a school concept, which is a resource center and residential school, home-bound instruction, hospital instruction, and community-based programs. Alternative modes of service delivery to reach the disadvantaged children in far-flung towns, depressed areas, and undeserved barangays. For example, rural schools in particular face unique challenges including shortage in personnel, training, and material for special education. Preparing teachers to provide education in rural areas with the technological development and focus on vocational is bound to make educational more meaningful. The problem on those areas are the physical distance of the student to school is the more of the problem. The solution would be to build more school to minimize the bus time, but alternative of this are in-home or online classes, one-on-one tutoring. Also, the problem of teacher hiring because no people wanted to be placed in rural area. So the best solution is to give a higher pay and better benefits. Overall, the goal of special education program is to help the person who has physical or mental disability in giving them a chance to prove themselves, make their own decision in life, and live independently like others, and get a higher education and live a normal life, and get a higher education and work like a normal person. That's all, thank you.
It goes on and on and on.